let's talk about the academic standing policy at Kennesaw State University. A student is considered in good academic standing if they have a 2.0 or higher institutional GPA. So the institutional GPA includes only courses that were taken at KSU. And if a course is repeated, only the highest grade is going to factor into that IGPA. So we do allow for grade replacement. So for example, if a student fails a course and then they retake it, the F will come out of that IGPA calculation and the new grade will go in. The easiest place for you and a student to see their IGPA is in the top left of their degree works. Students who are on probation, so that would be if they have below that 2.0 term GPA, they are no longer in good standing, they are on academic probation. They could face academic dismissal in two different ways. Number one, if they do not earn at least a 2.0 term GPA in a given semester, including a summer term. So if they're on probation, they are registered for courses, their courses for that one semester, their grades don't average out to a 2.0, they would be facing dismissal after that semester. The second way they could be facing dismissal is if they don't bring their IGPA up to a 2.0 or higher within 3 semesters of enrollment. So if a student goes on probation as a result of their fall grades, they would then have spring, summer, and the following fall to get that GPA back up to good standing before facing dismissal. Again, as long as each of those semesters they have that 2.0 term GPA. Because if they don't have that 2.0 term GPA, they would immediately face dismissal. But assuming their term GPA is a 2.0 or higher, they're allowed up to 3 semesters to try to get back into good standing, which is that 2.0 overall institutional GPA. And it's important to know that if a student completely withdraws from a semester, so they drop every class that semester, it does not count as one of their 3 semesters. So let's talk about what happens if a student does face academic dismissal. So there are 3 dismissal types, and students would move through them in a sequence. So if a student is being dismissed for the very first time, they're going to be facing dismissal 1, and that means they have to sit out for 1 semester before they can reapply to KSU. If it's their second dismissal, then they have to sit out for 1 year or 3 semesters before reapplying. And if it's their third dismissal, unfortunately, they are no longer eligible to reapply to return to KSU. But students do have a right to appeal. So there's a couple different appeal options. One is the dismissal appeal. So if a student is facing academic dismissal, they could appeal that decision. If the appeal is granted, it would allow a student to immediately return to KSU without having to sit out the full term of their dismissal. So if it's dismissal 1 and they immediately fill out that appeal and get it granted, they don't have to sit out at all. They could go on dismissal 2, and then after sitting out for maybe 1 or 2 semesters, they then choose to appeal and they get to return early. Or it could be dismissal 3 and they get that appeal and they are allowed to return 1 more time. It is important to note that even if a student gets the appeal granted, it still counts as one of their dismissals, even if they don't have to sit out. So if a student faces dismissal 1, their appeal is granted, they return the following semester and never sit out at all, it still counts as dismissal 1. So if they do face dismissal again, in that case, they would be facing dismissal 2. And as they move through those dismissals, when they return, it's the same policy as it was when they were on probation initially. So they still have to get that 2.0 term GPA, and they still have 3 semesters once they return to get their IGPA back to a 2.0 or higher. And then again, if they fail to do either of those, then they would be facing whatever the next dismissal is. And then the other type of appeal is a withdrawal appeal. So if a student earns all Fs or WFs in a semester due to non-academic reasons, they can apply to have those grades changed to Ws, which do not hurt their GPA. So if you ever see a student, if you're looking at their academic history and they have a full semester where they had nothing but Fs and WFs, as long as it's been within a year, they can still complete that appeal. So for example, if a student completely fails everything in fall 2021, they have until the end of fall 2022 to submit their appeal. So that's always a good idea to look at that when you're looking at a student's history, not just when you're looking at students on probation, because it could be a student in good standing who would still benefit from that appeal. So let's talk about readmission. For a student to return to KSU after being academically dismissed, they must apply through the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. So they can reapply once they've either sat out for the full length of their dismissal term or they've been awarded an appeal. And students who are readmitted from dismissal will have a readmit advising hold added to their account, and this will prevent them from being able to register for courses. So they must meet with an advisor to have that hold lifted before they can register for their first semester of courses once they return. It is maybe important to note that if a student faces dismissal and then they get an appeal immediately granted, their courses may not necessarily be dropped. Often they wait to drop those courses from students' records until after they've made decisions about appeals. So those students will have that hold, but they're already in courses. So they really only need to have it immediately lifted during that drop add period if they're going to make any changes to their schedule that semester. If not, they can wait until after drop add to have that hold lifted. It's not going to impact their classes that they've already registered for them to have that hold on there. And one other thing you may want to think about when meeting with students is academic renewal. Academic renewal will reset a student's institutional GPA. Students are eligible for academic renewal if they have been out for 3 or more years. So if they haven't been enrolled in any USG school, so not just KSU, but any University System of Georgia school for 3 or more years, then they could apply for academic renewal. Again, that will reset their GPA to just a neutral 0, which would mean they would no longer be on probation of any type. It does take their D, F, and W grades out of their degree progress, which of course F and W's don't count towards your degree anyway, but sometimes sometimes D's can. So you may meet with a student who has several D's in their gen ed especially, and those D's are counting and satisfying degree requirements. If they were awarded academic renewal, those D's could no longer apply. So it could mean in some cases that doing academic renewal would mean having to repeat several courses that they otherwise wouldn't have to repeat. So it's not always the best option for every student. So that is one thing I like to check when meeting with students is how many D's are they using? If it's a lot, you can still tell them about academic renewal, but maybe caution them that it's not necessarily going to be the best option for them, possibly. If a student is interested in pursuing academic renewal, they would need to email Mike Red in the registrar's office, and he will schedule an appointment with them to go through all of the details and make sure they fully understand before he processes that application. So he will fill in any gaps that you may have missed about this process and what it means and what it does, and they would just need to email him to set that up. So this is a form I like to use whenever I meet with students who are on probation or returning from dismissal, and I would encourage you to consider using it as well. It provides a nice framework for you to talk through things with the student, and it gives them something that they can refer back to later. And I think it just makes the whole policy a little bit easier for them to digest and understand. It can be confusing for some students to really understand all of the terms of the academic standing policy and where they are within it. So to do this, you would just type in everything and then just make sure you do a save as so that you're not saving over the template. So you would fill out the top portion of their information. Current institutional GPA you can get from their advising guide or their degree works. Hours counting towards IGPA I like to get from their advising guide. And then grades needed to earn a 2.0 GPA or higher. I will be sharing some resources on how to calculate that. So if you are interested in doing that, providing that information for them, you can. If you're not comfortable doing that, you could always just delete that part and not include it. And then it goes through sort of the terms of the policy. So one thing to note is students that are on academic probation can only register for up to 13 credit hours in the following semester. They must maintain a 2.0 term GPA each semester, and they have 3 semesters to get back into good standing. And so I usually actually type these in, so I might do something this, and then I would bold that third one to draw attention to it. And as I'm going through this with the student, I always explain that this is based on semesters of enrollment. So in this example, if they chose not to take summer classes, it would actually be spring, fall, and then spring 2023. And then I delete whatever cases don't apply to the student. So if this student is on probation and they've never been dismissed before, then if they face dismissal, it'd be dismissal 1. So I would delete the 2 and 3 lines. And so same thing, if it would be dismissal 2, I would delete 1 and 3, and so on. Then down here, I list out the courses that they can retake to do grade replacement. So anything that they've failed or gotten a WF in, or a D if it's a major course that needs to be a C or higher. You can have them sign if you want to add a little extra accountability, or you can just delete that. I realize, especially with virtual appointments, it's more challenging to get a student to sign something. And then I always leave this kind of disclaimer at the bottom, just as some insurance for you that this is not a contract. GPA calculations can vary. Ultimately, all of this is the student's responsibility to confirm with the registrar's office. So especially if you're concerned about giving them information about GPA, that can kind of cover you a little bit there. So I would fill this out for any student who's on probation and share it with them during the appointment and send it with my notes. And I want to show some things you can be looking for in the advising guide that might be helpful for you as you're working with students on probation. So if you scroll down until you get to their academic information, here you can see all of their institutional GPA information. So this is where you can see that iGPA, and here's where you can see how many credit hours are factoring into their iGPA. So that's important to have if you're calculating a future GPA for them. And then their academic history. So this is really helpful in determining how many more semesters does a student have before they're potentially facing dismissal. So we'll use this student as an example. So in her case, she must have been admitted on probation because she faced dismissal right after her first semester. That's not as common, but that's kind of what happened here. So the standing that you see here, it's important to remember this is a result of this semester's grades. It's not the standing that they were in during that semester. So during fall semester, she was on probation because she was apparently admitted on probation. After her fall grades posted, then she was dismissed, and that's because she failed everything. So she didn't have that 2.0 term GPA. So as a result of fall semester, she was on dismissal. Okay, then she came back summer of 2021, and after that semester, she was still on probation. So she wasn't dismissed because she had at least a 2.0 term GPA, but her iGPA was still below a 2.0, so she got to continue on to the next semester, but she was on dismissal. She was on probation. Then fall semester, she got a B and a D. So again, she had the 2.0 term GPA, but still you can see her institutional GPA is not where it needs to be back in good standing, so she is still on probation. Now, I don't pay too much attention to these numbers because, quite frankly, they don't make a lot of sense to me. Why are these both P2? Truly, I don't know. And I see that sort of weirdness all the time. And I've asked clarifying questions and honestly haven't gotten super clarifying answers. So I don't worry too much about what number you see there. Just count the semesters. That's the easiest way to do it. So this is 2 semesters, right? She came back from dismissal. When she came back, she gets 3 semesters. So she's already used 2. She's got the summer and she's got the fall. We know right now, because up here it shows that she's enrolled for the spring. So she's in classes now. This is her 3rd semester after returning from dismissal. So this is her final opportunity to get back into good standing, or she'll be facing dismissal 2. How do I know it's dismissal 2? Because she's only been dismissed once. You'll see some students that'll have AD a couple different times. And sometimes they're back to back. So it's always helpful for me to highlight so I can see what semesters I'm looking at. Because sometimes, like for example, this block, it could at a glance over here on the right just look like that's 1 semester. But then when I kind of highlight it, I see, oh wait, that's encompassing 2. But anyway, if you see that she's already been dismissed twice, then you know it's going to be dismissal 3. If there's no AD on here at all, than just probation, then you know it's going to be 81 that she's facing. But counting the semesters is the easiest way I've found to track how many more semesters they have until they're potentially being dismissed. And it's, again, so important to remember the standing is a result of the semester. It's not their standing during that semester.